كله يجي قدام انما مفيش قاعده ورا دي around the Luna. تعالوا تعالوا قدام كده بقى تعالوا
Okay. Ooh, this is working. It's a miracle.
This is a miracle.
Yes. Don't be shy. Yes, the better the discussions. All right, shall we dive in? Okay, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. So, is there a God? Yes. Okay, let's all go home. Isn't that nice and easy? No, we have a few more things to say today. So I'm going to start with, how many of you have seen a television show called House? Hands up if you have. Yeah? Okay, well, I've got the Venerable Dr. House here. This is one of his quotes from the show. Rational arguments don't usually work on religious people. Otherwise, there would be no religious people. So what's he trying to say there? Well, he's not trying. What's he saying there quite clearly and bluntly? Yeah, if you're going to be religious, basically you have to give up on being rational. And if you're going to be rational, then basically you're going to have to give up on being religious. How does that make you feel? I'm not asking you yet, how would you respond, or why is he wrong? I'm just asking you the very simple question, how does that make you feel? Yeah, you're going to have to do a bit more talking than that.
Maybe sometimes we have questions, there's no answers because not everything makes sense. And we have to
Yeah.
have faith in things, or like some things don't make sense.
You just have to take them on faith.
Yeah.
So do you think Dr. House would be happy with you? He wouldn't. So how does that make you feel? Is he right? You think he is? Why do you say that?
Because we have to believe in so many things that sometimes don't make much sense. And it's part of a religion, I guess.
Yeah.
And you need to believe in it for it to make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense first. It doesn't make sense first. It makes sense once you believe in it. I feel. Right.
Yeah?
I think rationality is like a core, like not all the time.
So why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because our faith within itself is a rational faith. It's not a faith based on blindness or anything like that. You can't take away the rationality of something and say it makes sense, or you have to believe it for it to make sense. Because that contradicts within itself our own religion.
Okay. So we have, what you've represented here is actually two broad schools of apologetics. Right? One is called, forget about their names, right? One is that you can look at the evidence around you, look at the world, and from that you can include, if you like, the Bible and Jesus and everything, and from that you would rationally conclude that there is a God and he is the God of the Christian faith and so on. And therefore you then put your trust in that God. The other one says, you can't approach God that way. This is not that kind of thing. And you have to first believe and trust in God. And once you do, then everything will kind of make sense. And even if it doesn't, that's okay, because we don't expect everything to make sense. So most people would kind of fall into one or the other. Even atheists kind of fall into one or the other, in a sense. When they reject their faith in God, they're often rejecting their faith either due to rational reasons or because they don't like the you have to believe first. And they'll say, well, okay, you've had an experience of God, good for you. I haven't had that experience, so you can't expect me to believe in God. So we're going to try and sort of tease this apart a little bit more today. Before we do, just by way of introduction, some of you already know me, I think. Some of you, we have not had the pleasure of making an acquaintance before. So I need to warn you that even though I look like your standard average Coptic Abuna, in some ways I am not. So I'm not going to be offended. I can give you a 100% ironclad guarantee. Nothing you can say tonight will offend me, nor will it make me judge you or think that you are a bad person for asking this question or anything like that. In fact, please forgive me for this, Abuna. I'm sure by the end of tonight, Abuna Joshua is going to say, okay, we're not having him again. So I actually want you to be honest, right? I want you, if there is a question that's come upon your mind, please don't be ashamed or afraid or feel, I can't really ask this question. I only have one rule. You can ask anything at all. You can make any point at all, so long as you are courteous. That is the one rule. And they look like a courteous lot. So I don't think we're going to have any problems with that rule. Okay? We've got a deal? So you can say anything you like, ask anything you like, because to me, the approach to our belief in God is based on a desire for truth. To me, this is the guiding principle. If you care about the truth, if you wish to live in the truth, if you wish your faith and your beliefs to be based on truth, then you have to be brave. You have to actually face up to questions. Look, some people have a very beautiful, lovely, simple faith. And to be honest with you, I'm jealous of them. I wish I could be that way. My mum was like that. Whenever any of this kind of topics that we're going to talk about today would come up, her standard response was, Ya Sheikh, uskut. Roughly translated, old man, be quiet. I think if that's somewhere, something like that. In other words, like, why are you even talking about this? Right? Don't waste your time. God is God. We know that. We love him. We worship him. He loves us. He looks after us. What else is there to say? Why are you even asking these questions? And that's lovely, right? She had a beautiful, lovely, simple heart. She lived a beautiful, lovely Christian life. And that's terrific. But at least one of her children stays up at night thinking about these questions. I have what I like to affectionately call a twisted mind. I'm curious. I need to know. I need to understand. Truth really matters to me. If my faith is not based on truth, I don't want to waste my life following a lie. I want to know the truth. And that is a dangerous thing to do. And the reason I'm telling you this is if you happen to belong more to my mother's kind of person, please feel free to totally and utterly disregard anything I say tonight. I will not be offended. I will not be upset. I perfectly understand. Please feel free even to say, Ya Sheikh. And even uskut. If you get up and leave, I don't mind at all. Because that is a blessing, I think. That is a gift from God. But I think it's also a gift that he's given us brains, and some of us use them in ways that other people don't. So if you are the kind of person who does have a twisted mind, then I hope we'll be able to see how that can also be a gift from God as well. Because I've been sort of dealing with apologetic topics for a large number of years now. I actually have Richard Dawkins to thank for it. That's another story I won't go into now. And that was way back 15 years ago or so. And there have been times, I'll be very honest with you, there have been times where I thought maybe our faith is wrong. And there have been times where I've questioned and I've wondered, and what would I do if that were the case, and all these kinds of things. But I have to be brave. I have to look for the truth. I can reassure you there is a happy ending to this story, which is that after many years and an awful lot of reading and discussing and talking to atheists and talking to Christians, talking to people of other faiths, reading as much as I can, going to uni and studying stuff, all kinds of things, I think my faith in God is stronger today than it ever has been at any time in my life. And one of the reasons it's stronger is, I think, because of what you were saying earlier, I can now see the rational, logical foundation for believing for God. Maybe that's not for everybody, right? For some people, that's got very little to do with it. It's much more of a loving relationship kind of thing. And that's terrific, that's fine. For me, I think I had that kind of brain that needed that rational foundation. And it is incredibly, surprisingly strong, this rational foundation. In just, half an hour or 45 minutes, I will only be able to give you a little taste of how strong it is. But there is so much more that we could say about everything we're going to cover tonight. And I will have some suggestions at the end for, if you do have a twisted mind, some avenues you can pursue to help you in that direction. Let's see if Dr. House is right, shall we? So, I'm going to suggest tonight, this is roughly the conclusion I hope to get to, that believing in God in the way that Christians do is actually the most rational position that a human being could take. And I'm going to give you some reasons why I think that's the case. And I'm going to suggest to you that to believe that there is no God is not only unlikely to be true, it also shows a very narrow approach to truth, a very narrow approach to understanding the world that's around us. Or, if you like, a lack of imagination, to be frank. And again, I hope that will be a little bit clearer as we go along. One of the kind of initial signposts to this, or indications of this, is the fact that the vast majority of the human race throughout history and today across the world believe in some kind of God or gods. Belief in a divinity or a deity is remarkably widespread. In advanced Western countries, organized religious faith is going down in numbers, in proportions. Spirituality is not going down. So what's happening is people are leaving the institutions of church for all kinds of reasons. The Catholic scandals is one big reason in that community, and people being independent and free-minded and not wanting to be told what to do and not have to come 2 hours at church every Sunday, etc. There may be all kinds of reasons for that. But people still feel that there is more to this world than, just the physical world that's around us. And they look for it in, New Agey stuff. They look for it in Eastern religions, Buddhism and Hinduism. They look for it in mysticism. Which are the minority of the world in the context of the rest of the world, religion's actually growing everywhere. And that's an important thing, right? We can't just ignore that fact. That is a fact about reality, that by and large, human beings believe there is something more to this life. There is something more to this reality than just physical things bouncing around in space and time. In fact, the idea of totally denying any kind of divinity, of just believing that all that exists is just atoms and energy in space and time, and that's all that there is a very modern thing. If you trace it back, there may have been an odd individual here or there, but as a cultural thing, even when you look at the church fathers who were apologists, who defended the Christian faith, they shared an assumption with the people they were talking to, whoever those people were. And that shared assumption was that there is some kind of divinity in reality. So the pagans used to call the Christians atheists. I don't know if you know this or not. Actually, I think Samuel may have mentioned this last week, right? Here's a test. Why did they call them atheists? Let's see if you remember. Why were the Christians considered atheists? You look like you remember. Yeah, they denied the Greek or the Roman gods. Therefore, they do not believe in the gods. They are atheists. A being the negative, theist being someone who believes in a god or gods, right? So the Christians were called atheists. But notice, right, the argument between the church fathers and the pagans was not, is there a God? The argument was, are there many gods or one God? Right? The argument between Justin Martyr and his Jewish friend in the 2nd century was not, is there a God? It's, what is the nature of God? Is he the God that the Jews believe in, or is he the God that the Christians believe in, revealed in Christ? So throughout history, up until maybe only 200 or 300 years ago, Christians defending Christianity were not trying to prove the existence of God to people who doubted that God exists. They were trying to prove that divinity is the Christian way of thinking about it, not other ways of thinking about it. They shared the idea that there is divinity. They just argued about the details. Is that sort of making sense? And again, that's a really important thing to keep in mind, that the kind of atheism we are thinking about here tonight, when we think of like Richard Dawkins and Dr. House and all those guys, they're an aberration. It's actually statistically a teensy-weensy tiny part of the human experience that anyone has ever thought that or considered that to be, a viable way to think about the world. So when the early church fathers were talking about the Christian conception of God as revealed in Jesus, and today when we speak to the atheist who wants to say there is no divinity at all, our story hasn't changed over 2,000 years. What we think about God has remained the same. And I want to make this point a lot because I want to point out that a lot of the arguments I'll be telling you today are not just arguments that people came up with to prove that God exists to those who in modern times think that God doesn't exist. They were actually the same things. We're not sort of changing what we're saying. We're actually saying the same thing that we've been saying for the last 2,000 years. And I also want to make it very clear that since people have had many concepts of what divinity is like, maybe God is the universe, maybe there are many gods, maybe they live up on Mount Olympus, maybe the tree in your backyard is a god, maybe your cat is a dog, right? We're Egyptians. They used to worship the cats, right? How many people have a cat here? Maybe. Yeah, did I say dog? No, that's not what it is. Is a god. Maybe your dog is a god. Maybe your dog is a cat. Anyway, no. So if you have a cat, you will know how easy it is to worship them because they just demand it of you, right? Your cat doesn't belong to you. Let's be frank. You belong to the cat, right? You work for the cat. That's just how cats work. So there are all these different ideas of what divinity might be like. So I want to make it very clear that as a Christian, I don't need to defend, the Hindu conception of 300 million gods or the Buddhist conception of, God being the universe or whatever it is, right? I don't need to do that because that's not our conception of God. I also am not defending the institution of Christianity or even the religion of Christianity. And this is one of the reasons Abuna's not going to invite me back again. I actually don't think that Christianity is a religion. I think that the word religion has taken on certain meanings and connotations in our society today, which immediately connects it to institutions and hierarchies and rules and things like that. But that's actually not what Christianity is at its heart. Christianity is actually a way of existing. The way of existing. Yeah, thank you, Abuna. Exactly. That's exactly, in the Didache they call it the way. That's what it is, right? Look, there may be good reasons why we need the institutions and the hierarchies and all those sort of things, but I'm certainly not going to start talking to an atheist and saying, oh, you have to accept the apostolic succession, of St. Mark in the Coptic Orthodox Church or whatever. No, that's way down the track. That's certainly when you've come to believe in God, then we can talk about that, because then it'll be relevant. But what I'm talking about tonight is simply the experience of God, the encounter with God, and therefore our understanding of God as Orthodox Christians. And that's really actually a very small target, if I can use that word. It's a very small thing. And I'm not even going to try and defend. So, for example, in a certain strand of Protestantism called Calvinism, those who follow the teachings of John Calvin, conception of God that I'm going to try and defend today. He is the necessary, uncaused first cause, the ground of all being, the source of all reality. I'll elaborate that shortly. If God is God, he is beyond human. There was an old comedian called, hands up if you remember Woody Allen. Yeah, Buddha's showing his age. You remember Woody Allen? He had a beautiful line. Yeah, he's a very depressing comedian, I have to say. But he had this wonderful line. He used to say, I would never want to belong to like if their standards are so low that they would accept me, then that's not a club worth the world has value, things called good and evil. And they seem to be, this is one of the big surprises I got the more I delved into it, they seem to be objective. It's not just that good and evil depends on what I think or what you think. So this idea of goodness, morality being relative, it was a big thing in the second half of the 20th century. They call it postmodernism and all that stuff. It still continues in some areas like literary studies and so on. But the really interesting thing is that most philosophers now, the people who really think that you really only have two options. Either there is a real good and evil in the universe that is just as real as about truth. One of the conclusions I've kind of come to is let's stand side by side and let's together try to find the truth. Because if an atheist says to you, I don't care about the truth, does this work? It does. Ooh, this one has a little echo. Let's go on, right? Being before the ages and reigning forever. What is that speaking about? Time, right? Being before the ages and existing forever, reigning forever. Who dwells in the highest and looks upon the lowly. What's that talking about? Space, right? So in this one little prayer, written, we attribute it to St. Basil, but he was probably adopting prayers from even earlier than the 4th century, way before we had any concept of a Newtonian time and space or a Einsteinian relativistic space-time manifold or any of those things, right? In this one little thing, St. Basil, by the grace of the Holy Spirit, is contemplating, or whoever it is who wrote these words, is contemplating and reflecting on the nature of the God he's addressing, and by the grace of the Holy Spirit, he puts reality as we understand it in this beautiful little passage. In this one little existence, we have truth, we have time, we have space. And all of it is God. You give me an apple. Okay. Prove to me that electrons exist. How are you going to do that? Yeah, get an electron microscope, shoot a cathode ray, you see the fluorescence, show me a few physics equations and things. Okay, there you go. The electron exists. Prove to me that fairies exist. You don't believe in fairies? There are people who seriously believe in fairies, by the way, but that's another story. We won't go into that one. The tooth fairy, yes, very important among fairies. Okay, but you see, you'd have a lot more trouble. What's the difference between fairies and electrons and apples on the one hand and God on the other hand? What's the difference? Was he right, or is he just being silly? have to go and study so that you know it. What do you do as a scientist or a researcher if you don't have a solution to a problem? You have to go and work on it until you come up with a solution. We can't have ignorance. We can't have doubt. And then you bring that mindset to trying to think about God where it doesn't belong. Because we can't know about God. This is a problem that our human brains simply can't solve. So if we are to use our imagination and broaden our minds, accept that there may be more things in heaven and earth than are found in your philosopher ratio. none of us seriously believe we're in the Matrix. I don't know, do we? Anyone? Right? We certainly don't live our lives that way. We live as though things are real and things matter, and we care about things and so on. Right? Because that's an act of faith. Once again, I just want to point out that sometimes an atheist will say, you have faith, I have the certainty of science. No, that's actually not true. Science itself still is full of mysteries. At the end of the 19th century, many scientists were saying, we have answered all the questions there are to answer. We have a complete explanation of the world. Within 20 years, that picture totally disintegrated. Because you had Albert Einstein come along with relativity, and he showed that you can twist time and you can twist space and you can maybe go back in time and all sorts of weird things. If you go near a black hole, you become spaghetti. If you go on a spaceship and go a little bit fast, you come back. 800 years have passed on Earth, only 1 year has passed for you. How does that work? And then you had quantum mechanics come along, which is even weirder. Schrodinger's cat is both alive and dead at the same time. What does that even mean? Right? It's crazy, right? We thought that atoms were little tiny hard balls that you can't divide. Turns out they're a wave, and they're not even a wave all the time. Sometimes they're a wave, sometimes they're a particle. Sometimes we don't know which one it is. If you measure one thing about it, you can't measure the other thing. Why? Why on earth is that the case? Science does not give us a clear black and white certainty about reality. It just doesn't. Anyone who understands science knows it doesn't. So you can't come along and say, well, you're crazy to believe something on faith. I'm sorry, every human being does it every second of their lives. We all believe things on faith. The question is, do we have good reasons to believe those things on faith? And here I want to make a distinction between two things. There is knowing God and there is knowing about God. And as Christians, our faith in the reality of God, although we can come up with reasonable or rational groundings for it, ultimately, I don't think for most of us that's the real reason we believe in God. It may be sometimes for some of us the reason we begin to believe in God. It may be how we deal with doubts about God. But ultimately, our faith in God is because we experience God. We live in God, and He lives in us. And for different people, that can mean different things, right? I think even the atheist lives in God. I don't think the atheist can avoid living in God. Every time the atheist jumps on a trampoline and depends on the law of gravity to bring them down again, they're living in God, because where does that law come from? Where does the force of gravity come from? From the ground of all being. It exists because of the one who causes all things to exist. He himself is existence itself, which is probably the wrong thing to call him, because I only have a tiny human brain. But whatever that means in the reality of God. So, in a sense, one of the things that sort of really inspired me to think about God was actually an atheist called Carl Sagan. I don't know if any of you guys are, even Abuna's not old enough to remember that one. You know, there was a show called Cosmos recently with Neil deGrasse Tyson. That was a remake of the original 1980s Cosmos. And Carl Sagan was also a very vocal atheist, but he was much more sensible than Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I was just a teenager at the time, and I watched this, and he's speaking about the galaxies and black holes and nebulas and stars and all these beautiful things. And he spoke with such poetic wonder and passion. He's an atheist. He's died now. He was an atheist. But to me, he was having a spiritual experience of God. He would never call it that. He would never think of it as the God that we Christians are speaking about. But where else does the universe come from? Where else does his ability to appreciate the beauty of the universe and be moved from come from? If not that he is created in the image and the likeness of God. So whether you call it God or not, I think all of us end up living in God. We Christians are lucky. Because God gave us more. He sent us Christ, who taught us about things about God that we could not otherwise have known. He filled in the gaps for us, and we have a more complete picture of that reality. But I think whatever you say about whether you believe in God or don't believe in God or whatever, I think, as I said, all of us, we believe in truth. We believe in existence. We believe in goodness. We believe in things being just and fair. All of those kinds of things are, for us, in a way, the way we experience God. So I think I can probably stop now, because I was just going to I think I've kind of said all these things. I'll run through them very quickly. I was going to give you like 3 very clear, concrete examples of what I've been saying so far. So interestingly, in the video that you showed, he mentioned this: out of nothing, nothing comes. And by the way, 0 does not equal 1. I just want to make that very clear, just in case you go home wondering about that. Let's see if you can work out why. But anyway, after the meeting. Yeah, you're right, yeah. Anyway, you can don't give it away. Okay. Out of nothing, nothing comes, right? If you have nothing, how on earth is it possible that something could come out of the nothing? That would mean that the something has to be caused. To cause, there has to be something that does the causing. But we said we started with nothing, which means there's no something, right? So if you start with nothing, the only thing you can possibly end up with is nothing. This is watertight. I'm sorry, it's logically watertight. How do we get around this? The only possible way we can get around this is to say there must be a capital S something, and we don't know how, but it has no cause. It is the cause of itself. I don't know, put whatever human language you want to put on it. But there has to be a something that starts the chain of existence and leads to other somethings. If you remove that first something, which itself has no cause, then we should not be here. But we seem to be here. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure that I'm here. You may be the Matrix, I don't know. But I'm sure that I'm here. And since I am here, then there is a something, which is me. Therefore, there must be a capital S something. And we Christians choose to call it God. This is one of the most powerful arguments, logical arguments, for the necessity of the existence of God. It makes God necessary. It's like, it's not a matter of opinion. It's not like, oh, maybe you could think about it this way or that way. No, if anything exists, God must exist. Sure, argue about what his nature is, what you can say about him, what you can't say about him, but he has to exist. Okay. The second one is the world itself, the universe itself. I think Samuel spoke a bit about fine-tuning when he was here last week. Sorry? You ran out of time? Oh, what a pity. He had some mind-boggling numbers to give you. My favorite number is that if you think of the force of gravity, right? There's a constant, G, capital G. 9.8's at the surface of the Earth, but there's a like a gravitational constant of 6.67 or something like that, right? If that value was just a teensy bit stronger, we would not have a universe. Everything would collapse in and you just have a big black hole. If it was just a teensy-weensy bit weaker, we would not have a universe because everything would just fly off and no planets or stars or anything would form. So they work out the bracket, what's the word? The range in which we would get our universe. And it turns out to be the chances of getting it there, if you think of it as a dial, right? The chances of getting it on exactly that point is something like, I can't remember the number. Well, this one is something like 10 to the minus 20 or something like that for gravity, right? But there's about 34 like natural constants and values in the universe. If you think of them all as dials, right? If you to twiddle them all, each of them has a value like that, like 1 chance in 10 to the minus 5 or 10 to the minus 40 or something. And if you then ask what are the chances of getting all of them right, That's when you get the number of 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123, I think it is. I might have missed a 10, yeah. And apparently that number, if you write it out, if you say 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, not even that big, just on a piece of paper, nice and small, guess how big that piece of paper would have to be? And you're allowed to use pages. Abuna says it would wrap around the earth, right? That's a big number, isn't it? It's actually bigger than that. Yeah. Maybe we could wrap it around our galaxy. It's actually bigger than that. Maybe we could just like make pages and fill up our galaxy. It's actually bigger than that. The universe as we know it is actually not big enough to hold all those pages of the number 0000. That's how big that number is, right? So you stand and you look at that and you say, and that just happened by chance? Seriously? Even atheist scientists and philosophers are boggled by this. And they say, we don't know the answer, but we hope one day we'll find a natural explanation for this. But what we have to admit is that this universe is incredibly unlikely. And that's why they think of like the multiverse. Maybe there's billions of universes and each one of them twiddles the dials a little bit differently and we just happen to live in the one that worked or something. But if you think about it, that's not science anymore, is it? Science means you have to be able to go out and test something. By definition, anything outside our own universe is beyond our reach forever. No information can pass to us. So even if that were true, that's not a scientific explanation, right? That's just a guess. That's faith, right? That's an idea that you have no evidence for. And you just have to believe it because I don't want to believe that there's a God who did it, so I'll just come up with lots of universes. Okay, that'll be my faith, but yeah.
So that infinity before, was that like, it has to be plus or minus?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then as a fraction of the possible ranges, and it's mind-boggling. Okay, and the last one is, and this is my favorite one, the centrality of love. It is universal human experience that love is the most important thing in the world. Whenever anybody forgets this, everything goes wrong, right? That is the whole history of Hollywood, isn't it? Every movie I've ever seen from Hollywood, you know, my job was more important than my family, but by the end I came to my senses and I realized actually my family is more important than my job. Even Hollywood gets it, right? Even those guys who are probably spaced out on drugs most of the time, even they get it. It is a universal thing, that the thing that gives meaning to our lives, the thing that fulfills us as human beings, the reason that we exist is so that we can become creatures of love, beings of love. That is why we are here. Even atheists love their families and their friends and everyone, right? Not everyone, sorry. But in Christianity, we get the clearest expression of this reality that everybody already knows in their hearts. Christianity is the one major religion, possibly the only religion in the whole world, that puts agape love at the center of the universe. We go so far as to say that God himself is love. That's how central love is for us as Christians. You don't find that in other religions. As an example, Hinduism. They don't do this, they've largely got rid of it now, but you have the idea of karma, good karma and bad karma, right? And if you see a beggar on the street, don't help the beggar. Why? Because they need to work off their bad karma. They need to suffer. If you help them, you're preventing them from suffering, so they're not going to get rid of their bad karma. So don't help the beggar. Right? Christ comes along, tells us the Good Samaritan. Right? The Samaritan who doesn't talk to Jews, he's the one who goes and helps the guy who was mugged. In Islam, the word love does appear in the Quran. It appears 80-something times. Almost every single one of those, most of them, are saying things like, God will love you if you're a good girl, a good boy, I should say. They don't have, gender-neutral language. Right? Be good so God will love you. What does that mean? He's not going to punish you. There's a few things about, what is it? There's one, I wish I'd brought it with me. There's one that says something like, if someone loves you, you should love them back. But, if they treat you badly and betray you, then you call down the curses of God upon them because they've deserved that curse now. You don't find the Christian, it's conditional love. That's exactly it, yeah. That kind of unconditional love that Christ taught, you simply don't find it in any other major world religion. And yet, everybody, even the Hindu, even the Buddhist, even the pagan, I think sometimes, when they see an example of that, they are moved by it. They feel this is what makes life worthwhile. Mother Teresa was a Catholic nun. Almost everyone in the world admired and respected her. I do say almost because there were some people who criticized her, but that's another story, and there are reasons why they were criticizing her, but we don't have time for that now. So why should we believe that God exists if he is that God of truth, the God of reality, the God of mystery, and he has created our universe in which his nature is reflected, and that nature is love. That is why we should believe in the God of Christianity, because he is the God of love. So, to summarize, all those kinds of things we talked about, existence, mystery, truth, love, nobility, morals, goodness, all those kinds of things, together with how the universe works and how beautifully it's fine-tuned and how we are conscious beings that are capable of admiring it and being moved by it. The only hypothesis, to use the scientific language, that explains all of those pieces of evidence, that doesn't try and do away with some of them because they're inconvenient. And that's why I said atheism shows a lack of imagination. It's like, I'm a conscious being who can experience beauty. No, that's just brain cells and electrochemical signals. That's all that is. There's nothing else to it. It's a lack of imagination. It's like seeing the world in a very narrow way. The only thing that really explains all of that is the God that we believe in Christianity. And I think that all the creation, we say this in the Tasbihah, praise him, O mountains, praise him, O birds, praise him, O trees. All the creation lives in God, worships God, exists within God, whether they know it or not. The rocks don't know it, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure the trees don't. Birds, maybe. Dogs, apparently, yes. But we Christians are blessed to know him because of the extra things that he has told us in Christ. But we must always be humble about this and remember that he will always be for us far beyond our understanding. Whatever little we think that we know and understand about him, we must always be modest about that and remember that the reality will always be something far more than that. So I'm going to stop there. I've talked way too much. I wanted to get you guys to talk more, and then I ended up talking. I said at the beginning, 3 ideas for if you do have a twisted mind and would like to pursue these kinds of things. There is the Aletheia Apologetics group, and they're on Facebook and video. You can just find them. And come along to a meeting. Abuna, we'd love you to come and join us sometimes.
I've asked Sam if we can have it here. So whatever happens, and Demian, if we can repeat the same talk here a Sunday a month, depending on how often it is, because our youth don't travel that much. We need a visa, so yeah. So whatever the
Yes,
topic is,
yeah.
we can repeat it.
Yeah, we should look into that, Abuna, definitely. There'll be some sensitive issues with not doing it at Mount Druitt, but I'm sure we could work those out. Because
Even if
they,
it's done at Mount Druitt, so even if we repeat it, so 1 week
Yeah.
at Mount Druitt, 1 week here, so it's available.
Yeah.
One that no problem.
yeah, we can certainly do that. We sometimes have guest speakers who are hard to get. I don't get them to repeat it, but when it's just like the Aletheia servants, I'm sure we could work. That would be great.
But I'm sure we can always get someone, like a guest speaker or something, we can take a bus from here. And it's a Sunday,
Yeah.
definitely on Mount Druitt, won't be a problem.
For sure. But I should emphasize, only come if you have a twisted mind. Okay? Because some people come and they actually get disturbed by, the questions being asked and the discussions that go on. If you get disturbed by that sort of thing and you're just happy in your faith, God bless you. That's wonderful. Thank God and stay as you are. But if you're the kind of person who needs to ask these questions, then I think it's for you. And also there will be a unit at St. Cyril's Theological College this coming semester, starting in a week and a half or so, it's an introduction to apologetics. So the kind of stuff we've been talking about today, but obviously going into more detail than that. Anybody wants to send me an email, I think, see the microphone's telling me to be quiet. I'm done.
Any question?
Use the microphone. Like it's not a big question, but at the beginning you were like the majority of people were always like believing in some sort of deity or God or something. But I feel like people these days would argue, we're smarter than all those, like we have science now, like what do you think of it?
Yeah, there is a word for that. Samuel's always telling me about this. Is it like, what is it? I think that's the one, chronological snobbery. Yes. And I think he's got a point. People were not stupid back then. They were actually incredibly bright. My guess is much the same, right? There's a standard bell curve, and I'm guessing it was the same bell curve all through history. I mean, what's really changed? Yeah. Oh, look, there's so much to say about that. Again, that's part of the narrowness of the modern Western atheist. To think that you can, we found this thing that works really well called science, therefore nothing else can be depended upon. That second sentence does not follow logically from the first sentence. In fact, what you should do is ask, what is it that makes science work so well? And the answer is, it has a very narrow scope. It simply describes patterns in how physical things happen. That's all that it does. That cannot capture things like love or beauty or an idea or an emotion. You need to add more to your world, and some people actually do this, or you need to deny that those things exist, right? There are some people who deny that there's any such thing as those wishy-washy things. That's what that is based on. We're smarter today because really what it boils down to is we've narrowed our world down, and therefore we feel more confident because we know more about that narrow bit of the world that we have the tools to deal with now. That's really what it boils down to. Are you really, do you really have a better view of the world? I would say no. I would say you've lost the things that really matter. Yeah.
What sort of like he was saying is that, so when he was saying, for example, that the people in our day and age, they believe in, for example, the atheist view more and more because they believe that they're actually more educated. I think it goes back to the point they were saying about Socrates in the sense that the wise people that he originally thought were wise were actually foolish because they did not know what they do not know, but they think that they know, right?
I followed that, yeah.
It's also the exact same concept with, I think, what Jonah's saying right now is that people believe that they do know a certain thing, but they do not know what they do not know.
Yeah.
And I think the other sort of like evidence of that is atheist within itself is a form of, it's a belief system, it's a worldview.
Yeah.
So one cannot actually say that my faith is the lack of faith because that within itself is a contradiction, because believing in Big Bang Theory or whatever scientific approach you want to take to it, that within itself is a belief system. So you cannot say I have a certain view without having faith, because you have to have faith, because science within itself right now cannot prove itself. And I think there's no contradiction between science and belief, but rather that science is like a mechanism of us understanding the belief, or actually a better way of putting it, just having knowledge behind our faith rather than blind faith. So I think it's the same. Like things the same about laws of gravity and whatnot. The whole, that particular approach actually, like I believe, is used to sort of explain or help us understand our faith.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much all of that. I think that It's a very important point, though, because often the atheist will pose the situation as, you know, you have this belief system. I don't have any beliefs. You know, I only have certainties. But yeah, you're perfectly right. And some sensible atheists agree that we all have belief systems. We all, we all base our investigations on particular pre-assumptions. We assume things according to the way we view the world. And those things that we assume obviously are going to influence the conclusions that we come to. And it's silly to deny that. And I think as Christians we should just embrace that, because that's what it means to be a human being. We acknowledge that.
I think so. Another point is like, atheism originally stems from that. The major concept comes from Darwinism, right? But a lot of it, like a large portion of it. If you're quoting Richard Dawkins, his main argument from that is Darwinism. But then Darwinism within itself is actually based on the theory that something has to exist for it to be able to
That's
evolve.
true. Yeah.
So variation cannot occur without existence.
Yeah.
So even the whole faith system within itself contradicts itself.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, Darwinism has certainly played a role in some parts of the world in producing atheism. America, particularly, where it's still a very hot topic. Apparently in England, Christianity had no problem with Darwinism from the get-go, from back in the 19th century. It was not really, you know, they had a few debates. Some people got called monkeys. After that, they just sort of said, you know what, this has nothing to do with the existence of God. God can make every species individually, or God can make a world that naturally produces species. In both cases, as you said, there is something that is the reason for it from the beginning. The rest is details. We don't need to worry about the details. I mean, you can worry about them, but it's not going to change whether you believe in the existence of God or not.
And just to pose one more question, just for argument's sake.
Yeah, why not?
That point that you said about how the atheist philosophers believe in that concept of an ultimate good and bad that is not objective. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I'm as astounded as you are. There was actually, I wish I could remember what it was. I like to listen to podcasts from the ABC all the time. Apparently that makes me a very unusual copt. I don't know why. Does anyone here listen to the ABC? Hands up if you do. Yeah, see, that's really weird. I don't know. What's wrong with our national broadcaster? Anyway, there was this, world-famous philosopher being interviewed. And he gave really powerful arguments that there is an objective good and evil. And then he was challenged, well, why? And suddenly, he was lost for words. Like, I don't know why. There's no reason. We just accept. Why are you asking? We don't need to ask why. It just is. You could. Or there are horrible consequences, yeah. I mean, Hitler could be a good thing. What's that? Yeah.
C.S. Lewis was kind of justifying, like, the kind of same thing you were saying, like, good and evil, it's got to stem from somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not just yet.
That sounds about right. I agree. He probably said it so much better than I ever did.
What's your question? I have no question. You said science, Christians would have propagated science, and they're the reason for it actually starting. So you mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson as well, and he says that if they weren't Christians, they probably would have followed their thoughts through more and not just given up and attributed it to God. What do you say?
I think he's not a historian. He hasn't done his research. It's as simple as that. Because when you actually go back and look, there's a guy called James Hannam. He's got a couple of books about this. One of them is called, I think, God's Philosophers. I can't remember the name of the other. You read that and you realize just how silly that view is, because it's just simply not the case. It is a fact of history that throughout the medieval period, most serious advances were made in the monasteries, because that's where the people were who could read. Very few other people could read. The monks were the ones who could read. They were the ones who were going through and discovering Plato and Aristotle and Avicenna and the Islamic philosophers and stuff, Galen and medicine and all that sort of stuff. Where was that happening? It was happening among people who had devoted their lives to the worship and the service of God. And it wasn't happening. I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons, but sure, if we didn't have religions, I don't know, we wouldn't have had that happening. But how does he explain this idea of a confidence in a law-like nature of the universe? Again, there doesn't seem to be, there are other cultures who are more technologically advanced than the Christian world, like China, for example. They're the ones who invented fireworks, spaghetti. They were noodles, yeah. Marco Polo brought back noodles, and that's what became spaghetti. Apparently that's true, yeah. Right? They built the Great Wall of China and did all kinds of things, but you didn't get modern science in China. You didn't get it in India, even though, again, they're not stupid people. They're very bright and intelligent people. But their view of the world was a very different one. A strong motive for trying to understand the world and find patterns in the world comes from the idea that the God I love and worship made this world, and the better I understand it, the better I will find his thought, and I will know him better. Yep.
ربنا عرفه بالعقل. So doesn't that say that you need to be smart at a certain point to actually recognize God? But it's not for Christianity or believing in God. It's actually not for simple-minded people. You need to be smart at a certain point to actually recognize God or the being, whatever.
I'd be more comfortable if we said you need to be wise to a certain point rather than smart. I think it's... Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah. 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 Because I think the gospel is for the little child as much as it is, for the professor. It's so beautiful and simple in its truth. And in that sense, I think, in some ways kids are closer to it than us grown-ups who overthink it, kind of thing. But I think I get what you're saying, though, which is that once you start there's another nice quote, I could try and dig it out, but it goes something like, a little philosophy leadeth a man to atheism, but depth in philosophy leadeth a man to faith. It's, that... No, someone later. I could look it up. Someone medieval, somewhere along the way. Francis Bacon, yeah.
And I think also the idea with kids and why it's easier for kids to believe in God and so on is because they have bigger imaginations. We lose a huge part of our imagination growing up.
Yeah.
They don't, so that's why it's easier for them because they're actually smarter. They have more imagination to believe in God.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abuna.
Thank you, Abuna.
I really don't know how to thank Abuna. I know Abuna put a disclaimer that if you have simple faith, don't come and attend with Abuna. We've got a series of these apologetic topics that we're going to do, not all in at once. We're going to be putting them through the program through the rest of this year. But I think I will put a disclaimer under what Abuna said. If you have a simple faith and you're not going to listen to anyone, keep your simple faith and don't go anywhere. But it is impossible to have simple faith these days and not be bombarded with people that are always questioning our faith. Whether it be at uni, feminism, or whether it be atheism, or they're all ideas that we get bombarded with that truly test our faith. And in testing our faith, even if it's simple faith, we need to have the ability to answer these, because you are going to be approached by these things at university. I think I could say I was one of those people that had that simple faith, until Abuna, when I started my MBA, and halfway through we had to do philosophy. And one of my friends said to me, there's two professors doing philosophy. For you, don't you dare do it with anyone else other than Steven Seagal. I said to him, why Stephen? He goes, if you do it with anyone else, you're going to fail. I said, why? He goes to me, because he's the only one that's Christian. And he was so true. He was so true, because if it was anyone else, I think there was going to be a short in here, and I would have ended up somewhere not very good. But it is true. It is true. Because this man was Christian, I was able to understand, I was able to accept. And imagine, today we were talking about the existence of God. One of the lectures we had, the first lectures, is the existence of me. And the thing he said to me is, prove that you exist. How do you prove that you exist? You can't. But one of the philosophers says, I think, therefore I exist. And that was my first experience with this, having to justify things for my own head. And unfortunately, ever since, my head kept on spinning. And yes, I wake up sometimes at night and I take notes. But it's beautiful. But this is the thing, yes, we can have simple faith, but we are bombarded all the time with question, with people trying to question why we have that faith. It's important to have the faith, but it's also important to be able to explain to people why we have that faith. So I hope to, again, Abuna, I don't know, I enjoyed this the most. I don't know about you. I know we had over 100 people on the stream, so there was over 100 people with us in this talk. I know our friends in the camp were watching it, and I know our friends that are in Gold Coast were on the stream as well. There will be more of these topics, and we're going to try and trouble Abuna and trouble Sam and trouble some of the other servants to come and give us and answer these questions. Yes, I know you want to take a photo and you want two announcements. حاضر بعد إذن أبونا.
This Sunday we have soccer as usual at 8 o'clock. If you have questions, ask Kiro. Okay. Okay, ask Pierre. Okay. If you want an actual answer, maybe message Kiro instead of Pierre. If next Tuesday we have our liturgy at 6, and then we have our normal Bible study at 8:30, chapter 48, Genesis. Next Thursday we actually have barbecue and games night at church at 7 o'clock, and followed by youth tasbih at 10. And then next Friday night we have another awesome topic, Is God Fair and Why Is There Evil and Suffering by Anthony Mansell. So that's a hectic one. I'm keen for that. Okay.